Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Brown, and I am one of the moderators for How to Have a Career in STEM. Thank you so much for coming. We will now have a welcome from Madam Regional Director.
You're muted, Madam Regional Director.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the South Atlantic region of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, presenting this webinar about how to have a career in STEM. I want to thank Mr. Robert Simmons and Micron for sponsoring this webinar. And Mr. Simmons, we love you for your passion for this area. And then I also want to thank Dr. Tiffany Brown for also being a moderator. And thank you to our esteemed panelists this evening that thought it not robbery to share your expertise with the young ladies and gentlemen that I hope that are in the audience that's ready to reap the benefit of having a webinar such as this. So thank you, enjoy your evening, and make sure that you pay attention because STEM is the way to go. And so thank you all so much again. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much. So everyone, we're really excited to have you. I am Tiffany Brown. I'm the sponsorship chair of the region. However, I'm also a clothing designer, and I'm kind of on the edges of STEM, particularly because if you know anyone who does pattern work, anyone who does any kind of customization, that's in that little area just a bit. But I do want to introduce Dr. Robert Simmons. He is the head of social impact and STEM programs at Micron Technology and Micron Foundation. In this role, he leads all Micron's social impact philanthropy of North America, as well as their STEM outreach programs. A noted scholar on education and race, American University appointed Robert a scholar in residence and a scholar in anti-racist practices, where he teaches doctoral courses on race and racism in society. Robert's research for the last 15 years has been focused on racial equality in STEM and the lived realities in historically marginalized communities of multiple K-12 contexts. Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons.
It's good to be here with everyone on behalf of our CEO and the executive director of the foundation. As a company, we're honored to partner with the region. We are honored to just partner with Black women. Black women have held up so many parts of our community for generations. And so I think that this is in honor of the ancestors and those who came before us and those who will come after us. So I'm excited to learn from this amazing group of people to expand our understanding of STEM. This is definitely demonstration that Black women are the most highly educated group of people in America as a demographic, and doing some super amazing work here. So super excited. I want to get into introductions because folks came to hear from this amazing group, not from me. And I want to first introduce Dr. Simona Hinton. Dr. Hinton is a full professor in the Department of Biological Sciences, senior faculty in the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development, and the director of RCMI Research Infrastructure Core at the Clark Atlanta University. Her primary research interest is in the biochemistry of cell movement and uses this knowledge to investigate cancer metastasis. She has done some amazing, groundbreaking research that I'll let her describe quite a bit in her opening remarks. I also want to introduce Dr. Lori Singleton. Dr. Singleton is a board-certified pediatrician who is dedicated to improving care for hospitalized children and educating our future physicians. She was raised in Georgia. She attended Hampton University, our home by the sea, where she obtained her Bachelor of Science in Cellular and Molecular Biology, along with being initiated into Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She then attended Vanderbilt University School of Medicine and went on to complete residency at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Dr. Singleton returned to Georgia after her residency to complete a pediatric hospital medicine fellowship at Emory. And she currently works at Morehouse as an associate, Morehouse School of Medicine, Department of Pediatrics, as an associate professor of pediatrics, and at the Pediatric Hospital, Children's Hospital of Atlanta. So I want to welcome Dr. Singleton to the webinar. Also want to welcome Dr. Joy Jackson Guilford. Dr. Guilford has worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 24 years at Eli Lilly and Company, Ortho Biotech Products LP, Abbott Labs, and currently at AbbVie in various roles in pharmaceutical project management and medical clinical affairs. She is currently the Director of Strategic Pipeline Partnerships for Equity, Quality, Diversity, and Inclusion Team in Corporate Human Resources. As a servant leader, she is a member of various organizations where she has held a variety of leadership roles. Most recently, due to her love of science, she developed a nonprofit 501c3 organization, JJG STEAM Foundation Incorporated, whose mission is to create and foster a learning environment that inspires students to pursue careers in the areas of science, technology, engineering, arts, or mathematics. So I want to welcome Dr. Jackson Guilford to the webinar and her super impressive credentials. I want to get that out. I also want to welcome Dr. Marsha Francis. In addition to the intro, Dr. Francis is actually a grantee of Micron, and so I have to name that because it's important. Because part of my commitment is to invest in leaders of color in the nonprofit sector. Over 80% of leaders that I am funding through my grant portfolio are people of color, and I just have to name that is super important. And so shout out to Dr. Francis for our ongoing partnership at Micron. Dr. Francis is an accomplished and nationally recognized educational leader with more than 15 years working towards educational equity and justice. She is the executive director currently of the STEAM Truck, a STEM education nonprofit in Atlanta. She previously served as the executive director of talent management at Clark County School District in Athens, Georgia, where she leveraged her knowledge of equitable educational practices, stakeholder engagement, and strategic planning to support district initiatives. Dr. Francis recently was named one of Education Week's 2020 Leaders to Learn From and has been committed to improving learning environments for STEAM education in Title I schools her entire career. So I want to welcome our partner at STEAM Truck, Dr. Marsha Francis. Last but certainly not least, I want to welcome Dr. Terkeisha Robertson Jones. She is the Southeast Region of Associate Vice President of Pharmacy at CareSource, a managed care health plan. Prior to her current role, Dr. Robertson Jones served as the Director of Pharmacy for CareSource's Georgia market. She earned her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Florida A&M University, FAMU, for those that pay attention to the HBCU world. She began her career as something that I've never heard of, and it's like for really smart people, but she was a career as a nuclear pharmacist. I have no idea what they do, but that is something that I need to learn about. Prior to joining CareSource, she served as the Pharmacy Operations Manager and Interim Pharmacy Director for the Georgia Department of Community Health Medicaid Division. These are some super amazing women, and I just want to thank y'all as someone who was a teacher and as someone who is a partner with the sorority. Y'all are a reflection of all things good and amazing, dope and brilliant that the sorority has going on in our society. I want to start with the question because y'all are here to have a conversation and spread your brilliance and insight. And I have two questions. I want to make sure I stay on task so Dr. Brown doesn't come looking for me. But I really am super curious about, we have nuclear, pharmacy, pediatrics, like all sorts of amazing things happening. When did you know that you wanted to pursue the career you are currently in? And can you tell us a little bit about your journey into STEM? And we're going to go in alphabetical order, and we will start with Dr. Hinton. I think that's about right, alphabetical order. G, H, probably not. But we'll start with Dr. Francis. Go for it.
Thanks for that introduction and that question. So as you mentioned, I'm coming to the work as an educator. In my K through 12 career, I was deeply immersed in the sciences, finishing human anatomy, AP bio, chemistry, etc. And around the time I was coming out of high school, I realized that TLC was showcasing surgeries live on TV. And I wondered if my stomach was a little too weak to survive a surgery rotation. In addition to all of the science that I did a lot of tutoring, a lot of supporting other students. And so I figured out I could mesh my love for science and my love for education and figured out, hey, let's create a career that really expands opportunities for other students that look like me. Part of something that folded that in is I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, which was not as diverse as I would have hoped it would be and didn't afford a lot of opportunities. So it really helped me think about equity. It helped me think about access. And so I pivoted and pulled all of those together to just be a champion for equity, really focus on ensuring that students have high quality teachers, have really dynamic experiences in the STEM field, science, math, pull them all together so that they would be ready at each level of their education experience and be open to these STEAM and STEM opportunities. Oftentimes your K-12 experiences can really shut down that pipeline or some of your access into these harder, more robust STEM careers. So I started on the front end, supporting K-12 schools and teachers to ensure that they're really opening up access to students of color, female students, and ensuring that they're not prohibiting students from coming into that STEM pipeline, they're opening it up for them.
Thank you for that explanation. Super excited to have you here. Want to turn it over now to Dr. Jackson Guilford and then Dr. Hinton.
Greetings and thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Simmons. I honestly must say I've wanted to be in STEM as far as I can think back. I remember when I was little, growing up in South Georgia, we had just built a house and my mom said, now I know it was a makeshift lab table, but I took some bricks and some wood and I had my own lab table then. And so I loved science in high school. I knew I was going to major in biology in college, which I did. Had planned to go to medical school. Actually, I was an undergraduate at Morris Brown College. We had an early medical school selection program with Boston University School of Medicine. I've been accepted into that. Planned to go to medical school at BU. And then I was doing research at the same time at Clark Atlanta University and Morehouse School of Medicine. And so after going through a rotation and working with an oncologist one summer, that made me go back and rethink what I wanted to do upon graduation. So I decided I took what we are calling now a gap year. Took the GRE during that time because I'd already, been accepted to medical school to get into graduate school. And so at that point, because of the research I had done at Morehouse School of Medicine, it was actually in Alzheimer's disease. Went on to Florida A&M University pursuing my master's in pharmaceutical sciences, PhD in pharmacology toxicology, with an emphasis in neuropharmacology because I looked at the effects of diabetes on memory. And so after doing that work, I decided that I love the bench research work. However, I did want to present more like the educational piece. And so from that point, normally after your PhD, you do a postdoc in academia. But, I started doing some networking and decided to pursue other things. And so what I did actually was I did a postdoc at Eli Lilly and Company at a pharmaceutical company because I knew I wanted to go into the pharmaceutical industry. Why? Because my professors weren't really sharing what other options were available to PhDs at that time. And I wanted to go and find that information out for myself. And that's exactly what I did. And so by going into pharmaceutical industry to do a postdoc, that opened up my eyes to so many opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry for PhDs and for scientists in general, for STEM majors in general. And so as you heard, I've been there 24 years. I've been in the clinical pharmacology side where I was able to actually educate doctors so that they can make an informed decision for their patients. But then I decided to pivot. I had a unique opportunity to pivot. As you can hear now, I'm in human resources. So that's the beauty of being in the pharmaceutical industry. You have all of these options available to you. And so from going to helping doctors make an informed decision for their patients, I'm now helping students make an informed decision on how they want to start their careers in industry. So I'm actually loving what I'm doing now. Again, it was a pivot, but because of the opportunities that have presented themselves to me, I thought it was an opportunity that I could not at all miss.
Thank you so much. That's an amazing journey, and I think you hit on some things that we'll have to follow up on: networking and the ability to pivot, which is super important in STEM careers. Dr. Hinton, turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. I'm not someone that pursued science, instead science found me. It started in high school where I had an amazing chemistry teacher. I went to all-girls Catholic school in New Jersey, and sometimes they would use graduate students and postdocs from surrounding universities like Rutgers and NYU and Columbia to come and teach upper level classes. So I had an amazing chemistry teacher. It was a woman that I connected with, and I enjoyed her class, and the sciences or the STEM courses came easy to me. So I just majored in chemistry with no plan, just because that's the course I like the most. I transitioned to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and I must have made the right decision because I received a full scholarship without even pursuing it. Then I went to Meharry Medical College for my PhD, with the same agenda. Just went because I had some excellent mentors who pushed me in that direction. I am a true Northerner, never heard of Meharry, probably never been south of DC at that point. And they pushed me down there, and it was the best experience. And then again, same exact experience where I was presenting at a conference on my research, and someone from Harvard came up to me and said, "Would you like to come join my lab for a postdoc?" So that is my science story. But I am glad that I found it. I'm glad that I pursued cancer, and I'll get more into my career later.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate your reference to not being South until you actually came South. So that's a whole interesting concept and thing to unpack. Dr. Robertson Jones, I want to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you for that introduction as well. Mine is a little bit closer to home. My older sister, Dr. Vandalyn Holland, who is also a FAMU pharmacist, has someone I've looked up to all of my life. She exposed me to the profession through various volunteer opportunities within the hospital setting where she served as the director of pharmacy, and throughout the community through the FAMU Pharmacy Alumni Association. So through those experiences, I realized that I could have a positive effect on the lives of others, which that's what I enjoyed doing. So after receiving my Doctor of Pharmacy degree, I began my career as a nuclear pharmacist. And so I'm gonna pause there because I know several people are like, what is a nuclear pharmacist?
Yeah,
We are the ones that make radioactive drugs. So if you've ever heard of someone going to get a stress test and they put you on the treadmill and they're trying to see how your heart function works, nuclear pharmacists are those that provide those radioactive drugs for those tests. Definitely a lot of protective gear that has to be worn on a daily basis. And a lot of times I would come home, as they call it, being hot, meant that I had some radioactive drug on me, and I would have to stay at the lab until I got that stuff off of me. So it was definitely a great experience being a nuclear pharmacist. So after a few years, I transitioned to retail pharmacy. I actually worked with Walgreens for a few years. And for the past 11 years, I've been in managed care through the state of Georgia with Medicaid, and now in managed care with CareSource. And that's my story on where we are with STEM.
I learned something new about a nuclear pharmacist. All right, I'm gonna have to look that up. That's super interesting. Thank you for that. Dr. Singleton, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I've known since I was probably in elementary school that I was drawn to science and specifically medicine. I always wanted to be a doctor. I did have a few moments where I kind of toyed around with other ideas like marine biology and a couple other areas, but it all went back to science and math for me. I focused and went to a magnet program that was focused in science and math for middle school. And then once I was in high school, really started to excel and get along in the advanced training with some of the AP math courses like AP Calculus, did AP Bio, AP Chemistry. And then during that process, spent some time in high school shadowing and seeing what the doctors were doing at the hospital in Savannah, as far as what areas seemed to resonate with me more. I went on to go to Hampton University and majored in cellular and molecular biology. I actually intentionally chose Hampton because I knew I wanted to go into medicine. So for me, when I was applying to college, I knew, hey, my end game is med school. I'm going to look for those institutions that have a good pre-med program. Oftentimes pre-med at that time, we're really focusing on your biology and chemistry. So I went with cellular and molecular biology, figured it would give me a chance to hit my science courses hard on. While I was in undergrad, really spent some of my summers trying to tease out the different areas of research. I spent one summer doing cancer cell research at UNC. I spent another summer in St. Louis at WashU and did different type of cancer research. So while I was out there, I actually worked with a plastic surgical team and focused on which patients were at risk of getting infections after they had reconstructive surgery following their breast cancer surgeries. At that point, I realized that kind of research was actually more interesting to me than the bench research. I like the aspects of how do the analytics play into things and how do we actually use that to improve the outcomes for our patients when they're leaving the hospitals. I went on to do medical school at Vanderbilt and knew when I went into med school that I was interested in peds. Originally had planned on staying south, but I had some friends that went up to Cincinnati and said, hey, I'll give it a shot, go out there for a visit, and loved it. That was never the plan to go to the Midwest and stay in the cold. While I got up there in residency, I started to see a different side of medicine. I started to see that patients come into hospitals, sometimes they get hurt and sometimes they leave with not the best outcomes. And as I delved into that arena of how do we make that better? How do we make sure people aren't getting harmed? How do we make sure people are having good outcomes when they leave the hospital and that they're having optimal health? I started to see that intertwining and intersection back into STEM at a different point in my career.
I don't know what you have against the cold in the Midwest. I take issue with that as someone who was born in Atlanta, but was spending most of my time in Detroit where it was cold. But we welcome everyone to come to the Midwest, enjoy at least one winter with us. But thank you for that. And I want to continue, Dr. Singleton, with you, and I want to go in reverse order this time. You all are just amazing and accomplished Black women in STEM, right? And have done some phenomenal things professionally, in the community and things like that. What's your secret?
I think my secret for me is really, I found my tribe. When I was in college, I found my connection with my sorority sisters, and every step of the way, they have been there for me. I felt like my medical school degree was theirs. My graduation from residency was theirs. When I got my job here, we all celebrated. And I think it's one of those things, finding your tribe, they are there for the ups, the downs. They will tell you their honest opinion. They will let you know when you're going the wrong way. And they will also remind you when those days get hard of, why are you doing this? Because there are days where you cry and you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm not smart enough. And they will remind you that, oh, no, girl, you got this. You're smart enough. Remember when you did this, X, Y, Z, and you can do this, stay with it. And I think the biggest thing is they'll also remind you that failure is part of the process. You don't get to where you're going without having multiple failures along the way. And I think finding those people that remind you to celebrate those failures and use it to fuel your fire is really my secret of what keeps me going.
I love the idea of finding your tribe. That's super important. Dr. Robertson Jones, what's your secret?
I would have to say I have 3 P's: prayer, perseverance, and persistence. Do not be afraid to ask questions. If you knock on a door, try the window. If the window closed, try the doggy door, whatever, how are you going to get in? But don't be afraid to ask questions and be persistent. And also, as Dr. Singletary said, to surround yourself with individuals that will support you personally and professionally. And I would say that would be the key to my secret sauce.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Dr. Hinton, what say you?
Everything that everyone has said, I also practice, but I don't like being stagnant and I like to keep moving in my career. And I like seeking out people who have traits or accomplishments that I have not yet achieved. So mentorship is really big to me. That's how I got to where I am, but also continuously seeking mentors as I achieve new level, seeking out the mentors for the next level who can help bring me up and endorse me in rooms when I'm not around.
Yes, sponsorship. Come on now, I like it. Let's see, Dr. Jackson Guilford. What's your secret?
Thank you for that question. So I like the 3 Ps. I have some Ps myself. 2 of them including prayer is passion and possibilities. Know that with everything, you can accomplish anything. I have a very strong faith. I will say my glass is always half full. I'll also add, and you mentioned this earlier, Dr. Simmons, networking, the power of networking. I will say that every single opportunity that I have had, whether it be graduate school, whether it be in my career, it's been through networking, whether it's through the tribe, as Dr. Singleton said, or through just individuals that you meet at individual conferences. I've always utilized my networking opportunities for my next step in my career. So as I mentioned, every single step that I've taken has been through networking. So I would say that definitely is my secret.
Absolutely, networking is important. Dr. Francis.
So I realized that I actually truncated part of my response and did not tell you where I went to school. So I am a proud graduate of Spelman College, and just like Dr. Brown. And I did my doc research at the University of Georgia in educational theory and practice. So my 2 things that have helped me along my journey is staying curious, staying really able to question, why is this happening? Why are certain access allowed? Why are certain things happen? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? In my dissertation, I used critical race feminism to really understand the history of certain structures, the history of oppressions, the history of education. And that helps me ask, well, why is this like this? Why are we teaching like this? Or why are we training teachers this way? So that curiosity is really important for me. And then staying connected and civically engaged. In addition to my membership in Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I am very engaged across the local Atlanta community. And I find it really important to find people in my tribe and understand experiences that I might not have, but I can help amplify the voices of people that might not have the loudest voice in the room and bring them to the table. So staying curious, staying connected, and ensuring that I can help amplify voices that might not be as loud as some of the other ones.
That's right. Absolutely. I appreciate that. Dr. Brown, I'll turn it over to you for the next set of questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons. So my question is, what are your advantages and disadvantages of working in the STEM field? Dr. Francis?
So again, using critical race feminism as the framework, the theoretical framework for my dissertation helped me really look at some of the maybe not necessarily disadvantages, but the ways that people, specifically Black women, are kept out of STEM fields from K-12 experiences that lead to their progression into college and lead to them being successful into these different roles that they often are kept out of. So some of the disadvantages might be, or the challenges, are that oftentimes we're one of the few in the room. And sometimes that's really alienating, and it's difficult to really find your tribe, dig in, and feel that success or feel the identity in those spaces. So that's a big way that appears as a disadvantage or a constraint for support there. But then the other advantages of being in STEAM or STEM as well is that we're able to bring that humanistic side to it. We're able to bring our personal identities to the things that we research and say, hey, here may be a perspective we hadn't considered originally. And so I think that's a huge advantage to ensure that Black women, women of color are definitely included in the decision-making when it comes to STEM.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hinton?
Thank you. So the disadvantages are probably the same as any Black woman who has a leadership position in any American career. So I don't want to harp on those because it doesn't matter what career we're in, we all could probably say the same thing. But in terms of being a medical scientist, the advantage of being a Black woman is being the voice of the community so that therapies and decisions can be considered, can be culturally sensitive and culturally considered when making these options. So for example, I sit on a panel for the American Association for Cancer Research, where we have this huge initiative to re-engage marginalized communities to trust in science. And this came out of the pandemic. Well, unfortunately, it's targeted towards underserved communities and underrepresented communities, but out of a panel of 50 of the brightest scientists in the United States, there are only seven people of color between African Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, and probably Pacific Islanders. And we are the ones that are carrying the voice to say, you know, consider this, consider that. It is not your race per se. You do not have a gene that absolutely, that makes you have this disease. A lot of it is cultural, it's social, it's the way you behave and the way you live. So for some of my panelists out there who are thinking about science or medical school, absolutely, clinical care is great, but also being a scientist, you have to be at the forefront to create the drugs, to invent the drugs, to invent the theories and all of the knowledge that the clinicians practice. So that's just my pitch to get your PhD in biomedical science.
Thank you so much. One quick question. How many women are on the panel as well? I was curious to know. Dr. Hinton?
How many, say it again, how many women?
Are on the panel, the cancer panel, the cancer?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of women. It's probably half and half, but between men and women, there is only about seven underrepresented scientists.
Wow, okay. Thank you. Dr. Jackson Gilbert?
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Similar to what Dr. Hinton said, is just having that seat at the table to be able to share what's important for your community. For example, you know, in my research, I mentioned earlier that I looked at diabetes and its effects on memory. And that was because I was a part of a clinic while in graduate school, and a lot of our African-American men and women were saying that they were being very forgetful. So that, you know, put a light bulb in my mind saying, maybe that's something that I should consider in my research, and I did. So having that seat at the table to be able to share with others what's important. I'll pivot to my current role, having a seat at the table from the equity, equality, diversity side, where, for example, we're looking at reaching out to students from historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions and getting them more interested in careers in the pharmaceutical industry. And so when my colleagues are not clear about what an HBCU is, what an HSI is, it's my responsibility to educate them and then bring these bright minds to the table to share with them the opportunities that the pharmaceutical industry have for them, because they're not aware, because they just don't know. And so it's our responsibility to share that with them. And so I would say that is definitely an advantage that I have seen, to be able to share with students the opportunities that are available to them and to get them interested in the pharmaceutical sciences and the pharmaceutical industry.
Excellent. Dr. Robertson Jones?
So it seems like some of our disadvantages kind of are around the same as far as with diversity. And I would have to echo that same sentiment. With me working in state government opportunities, I love my HBCU, which is Florida A&M University. And I saw that there was not any opportunities for those students in managed care. So once I got my feet settled, I made sure to advocate for the students from FAMU's pharmacy program to be able to have an opportunity, which is not something that is made often in state Medicaid. That's a special area of pharmacy practice that is very hard to kind of tap in. It's almost about who you know. So I'm happy to share that I was able to precept students and accept students while I was there. And then when I transitioned to CareSource, I saw that there was also some challenges with diversity. And this past year, we welcomed our first African-American resident for our program. And she also happens to be a FAMU pharmacist as well. And we're also going to be starting this summer, taking on some FAMU pharmacy students. So definitely that opportunity, to help others. But definitely there is a disadvantage. So I do want to tap on some advantages. So with pharmacists, we are one of the most trusted and respected professions. Our work-life balance, I can say that's a disadvantage and an advantage depending on which area of pharmacy practice. When I was a nuclear pharmacist, that would consider that a disadvantage because I was going to work at 1 o'clock in the morning, getting started making those radioactive drugs. But I'm in managed care now, and I have a better work-life balance that's more flexible, that allows me to have the time that I want with my husband and kids. And it doesn't hurt that the compensation is pretty good too.
I bet it is. Dr. Singleton?
Right. So for me, it's a little different with me being in medicine. I think one of the advantages is initially I went into medicine thinking it's just see the patient. And what I've realized is as medicine has evolved and we've had more advances in healthcare, there's actually so many opportunities outside of just being at the bedside and seeing the patient. I think having a career in STEM allows you to kind of pivot at different points in your life. Early on in my career, I really was engaged and wanted to spend all of my time clinical. Now I've kind of still find that very interesting, but I've shifted some to some administrative roles as well as some teaching roles. And although that may be different from the medical side at the bedside, STEM still comes up. So for me, I can still bring it back up in the education side from how are we using simulations to train our future doctors and our next leaders in healthcare, especially in times right now like COVID, where they have been pulled away from the hospitals in some settings and they're just now re-entering it. As far as disadvantages, I have to echo everyone else in saying that, sometimes being at the only one that looks like you at the table can be a disadvantage in meetings. And you have to find your voice and you have to be comfortable with making sure that your voice is present in that room. The other disadvantage is depending on what STEM field you go into, you may require some advanced training. And so you have to be able to recognize that early on and know that there is going to be some delayed gratification sometimes. Some of your peers, for those that are in college or those that are in high school, some of your peers are going to be finishing college and they're going to be off doing their thing, traveling. They may be starting their careers early on and you may still be in school, getting up and having 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock a.m. classes, staying up until midnight studying while they're still out loving life and living it up. But just keep in mind that you're in it for the end game. And so that you will get your moment, but it may just come at a different time.
Thank you so much. Great insight. I can remember working on my PhD. I was broke for a very long period of time. And so it was exciting to finally be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. So I love it. We have one final question. It is a doozy. Feel free to answer any question you would like. Everyone, if you could please put your questions in the Q&A and we'll actually allow you to ask the questions directly. So we'll allow you to talk so I can call on you. So the question is, how important do you see STEM jobs being in the future? What new jobs do you think need to be added in your field? Where is there a need? And what advice would you give your 18-year-old or your 21-year-old self with picking your major, trying to figure out medical school versus a PhD, and that guidance? Dr. Francis.
So that is definitely a very full set of questions. And I want to acknowledge that we did title this STEAM and we have focused very tightly on science. And so knowing that there are some other letters that come into STEAM. So your math, your engineering, your technology. And so for that first question, STEM is not of the future, STEM is of the now. STEM is right now. When I was in school, there were so many jobs, apps, etc. that were not even thought of that are around right now. Instagram wasn't a thing. Instacart wasn't a thing. FinTech wasn't a thing. So it's not of the future, it's of today. And so we have to find ways to make sure that we're ready for all of what's on our horizons. And we definitely need to be able to be a part of those decision makings and even on the cusp of creating some of those jobs from the unique perspectives that we're bringing to the table. I would encourage my former self and the folks on the panel right now is to be really well-rounded. when we think about college admissions or even grad admissions, when we think about getting careers, we want to be, yes, content ready and able to have those grades, those GPAs, it'll help us get certain scholarships. But then when you think about workforce readiness, you have to also have the soft skills that go along with those content hard skills to really make you be able to sit on a panel and have be able to have the presence to present. And if you're at a conference table, being able to share your ideas and also kind of get that pushback and work together to have a consensus. So the soft skills that go along with doing really well in your content area, that's really important. And I strongly encourage anyone on the call to think about rounding out their skills, not just digging deep into grades, but also thinking about being civically minded. How can you use the skills that you're learning to really benefit your community, your city, your state, and the world at large?
Thank you so much. Dr. Hinton?
Yes, Dr. Francis started to touch on what I was going to say about other careers that support STEM. So as the college professor, I see a lot of students who come in and their parents told them to major in biology because if they're going to go to college, then they're going to be a doctor, right? Or an engineer or something related. And that is not what this student wants to do. There are a lot of careers that support STEM without having to actually major in STEM. You may have to take a few classes to understand the field, but there are a lot of things that you can do that support it. So like a career that I did not know well, but a few of our students have gone into it is tech ethics, dealing with the ethics behind all of these technology creations, how technology is used, how information is shared, how data is shared, privacy is shared, even sharing information like the way, Facebook shares very private and sometimes egregious things. That's an area. Accounting, writing, there's so many other careers, business that support STEM without having to be a STEM major. So if you're iffy about actually pursuing the degree, there are other ways to be associated and connected with STEM without having to major in it. And you should really talk to your advisor and figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jackson Guilford?
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Similar to what has already been said, I think I'm going to touch on what I have told my 18-year-old self, or what advice would I have given myself. And that would definitely be to have an open mind. I went into college saying I am going to be a pediatrician, what Dr. Singleton does. And as I got involved in research, work at Clark Atlanta University at Morehouse School of Medicine, I really found a passion there. But I decided later in my college matriculation as a junior, rising senior, that I was going to pivot, when I could have just gone in with an open mind from the beginning and not necessarily had to take that gap year because I would have already been going to graduate school. So I would say definitely to keep an open mind of what you want to do with your biology or your chemistry degree.
Thank you. Okay, great. Dr. Robertson-Jones?
So I would like to say that the STEM careers are very much needed and relevant. I really truly feel that the pandemic showed us that. And as a pharmacist over the years, our role has really evolved, and we've taken a more clinical, active role in a lot of our patients' lives. Pharmacists are more than just standing behind the counter and filling prescriptions. But we're now actually managing patients' chronic conditions such as diabetes. We're managing them and training them on tobacco cessation. Of course, we're doing immunizations. But there's definitely a need in our rural areas. The main population that I serve are Georgia Medicaid members. And prior to the pandemic, our hospitals and healthcare institutions were closing, seemed like left and right. And so, of course, we all know they were overwhelmed during the pandemic. And a lot of our patients, they were not able to get to a doctor. Usually our standard, miles from that patient's house would be 25 to 30 miles, but they either don't have transportation or there's just no one in their area to service their needs. So definitely I see opportunity for more healthcare workers just in general. And due to the shortage of healthcare workers in those areas, they need technology access and tools such as telemedicine. So if you don't have a doctor within 30 miles of your home, but you have a device and you can, show and have a conference with a physician or a nurse practitioner. So I definitely see an opportunity there from a healthcare perspective as well as a technology perspective. And lastly, what would I tell my 18-year-old self? First and foremost, attend a HBCU for your training, preferably Florida A&M University. Everything that you go through is for a reason and will help develop you into the professional you desire to be. So just be patient with the process. Lastly, your goals and measure of success will definitely be different from others. So don't compare your journey. And I said lastly, but this is actually lastly, make sure you pay it forward. Someone may have helped you to get to that point. So make sure you pay that forward and help those that are coming behind you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Dr. Singleton.
Yeah, so my response to where do I see STEM going and where do I see a need actually is going to relate back to some of the answers you've already heard. I think with medicine, we know what's going on with clinical, but really where we're seeing a takeoff right now is in the technology side of healthcare. We're seeing digital apps come up, whether that's apps that helps the mom keep track of her child's asthma symptoms, or if it's an app that helps the diabetic patient track their nutrition. And where we see medicine shifting is integration of how are we going to use these digital apps that people are already using to connect them with their physicians and their medical teams. And furthermore, what does this mean when we start talking about medical records? We know a lot of our healthcare systems have gone on to using electronic health records. When I first came out of training, we were still mostly doing paper charts. And now that you have all of this electronic data, you've got many more opportunities to see where things can go in that direction. And so we start to see more of a need for people with the math background that can do some of these statistical modeling scenarios and kind of help us see what are the opportunities to predict different things that may be coming and may be on the horizon. We see opportunities to start launching some remote monitoring devices. So we see where patients with diabetes are having continuous monitoring of their glucose. Well, that information has to get back to the doctor somehow. Someone has to do the coding for those devices. So I think for me in my industry, I start to see it's not just about the science. We really need those people with the math skills, the technology skills to really continue to move things forward. And we need to look out and make sure that we continue to work as a team.
Dr. Brown, may I add one final piece?
Yes.
So when I taught at Spelman for 2 years, and I was a part of an interdisciplinary group of professors thinking about how to support students. And we had a conversation one day about the number of students that were leaving the biology profession or the science major. And there was this conversation around them being the top performers in their classes as they came into Spelman. And then sometimes the nervousness to get additional help. You know, I'm a top performer. I don't need to go to tutoring. I'm a top performer. I don't need to ask for help. And it was really important that the professors were saying, we really wish they felt comfortable enough to ask for additional help or go to someone and join the study group. So it wasn't a knock on them if they needed additional support or joined a study group. And they were trying to find a way to break down those walls to ensure that they could get the support that they needed. So just wanted to share for the group, even if you are in a difficult major, your professors do want you to be successful. And it might be hard to ask for help, or it might be hard to join a study group, but those supports are there for you to help you persist, do well, and go into that career that you're really interested in. So final nugget, definitely think about taking advantage of all of the resources there, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you didn't need it in high school, you know, that support is there to help you get through those different hurdles.
Thank you so much for that insight, because that is the blessing and curse of Black Girl Magic, because you're used to creating magic all the time. And so the one time, your magic wand is a little, sticking a little bit, you start feeling uncomfortable. And you're right, being overachievers is difficult. We're going to move now to the Q&A. So Sonia, I'm going to allow you to ask your question live. Sonia?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I was just wondering, and I apologize if this is not a platform for, if you all had a listing of mentors that would be willing to mentor young ladies interested in STEM.
Anyone can answer. You can start with Dr. Francis.
I'm not sure that I have a listing off the top of my head. I am engaged with a couple of different organizations, so I could share them via email, whatever I come up with for the different STEM careers. So if you'd like to email me at Marsha, M-A-R-S-H-A, and we'll share that later at steamtruck.org, I can share the information that I'll be able to access. If there's anyone else that has more information, definitely chime in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to answer, chime in? You can put your email also in the chat as well.
This also sounds like a good opportunity for us to create a network within the region.
Yes, it does. I love it.
That's a great.
And I was just going to add that I have a lot of our sorors, of course, colleagues that are more than willing to mentor students. I myself also mentor students. And so you can connect with me via LinkedIn. I will also put my email in the address, but LinkedIn is a really good networking tool as well. So feel free, it is my name, to connect with me via LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect you with the right person based on what you're interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So do we have any additional questions?
I have not seen
Tiffany,
any.
I just have one comment that for those young folks or anyone who's on the call interested in tech, I'm happy to make introductions. There's a whole group of amazing, in particular, Black women doing super dope work in tech that are always open to mentoring. And I also want to encourage young people who are interested in tech and medicine to also think about teaching STEM, because we can't see what we can't become. We need more Black women to go into STEM teaching. Also thinking about Black women going into leading nonprofits similar to Steam Truck, but there's also an amazing one started by a group of Black women who are engineers. They were trained as engineers at MIT, and it's STEM from Dance. And they do some amazing work. So folks can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. Happy to connect with folks and connect you to other Black women who are doing amazing things in STEM and tech in particular.
Excellent. I actually have a question for everyone. So when you were in your journey applying for your PhD, I know Dr. Jackson Guilford mentioned this a little bit, the process of applying. Can we get more into that? Can you each one of you, and this could be the last question unless someone asks one, about just your process and how you were able to stay motivated throughout the process? Because getting into a PhD program, getting into medical school is a process. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that. I'll start backwards this time, since I've been hitting Dr. Francis a little hard. Dr. Singleton?
I think for the process, the most important thing is finding that mentor. So for those who are in high school or in college, find that person that's a year or two ahead of you, that is going along the track you want to go to, and have those candid conversations with them and see what advice they give, what are places they found supportive. I think that, to me, on my application was very important. I wanted to make sure, as I was transitioning out of an HBCU experience, that if I was going to somewhere else, that I'm going to be in an environment that is going to be supportive of me. And so knowing someone that was a couple years ahead of me, that was at Vanderbilt, having a good experience, that kind of made me a little bit more comfortable with going there. Other than that, echoing what Dr. Francis said earlier, don't be as scared to ask for help, and don't look at failures as a bad thing. I took the MCAT the first time, was not happy with my result. I could have stopped there. I buckled down. I got the result when I was at WashU in the middle of doing a research rotation and made the commitment to, okay, I've never needed a tutor before, but hey, maybe it'll be helpful to do it now. I got one-on-one tutoring, went back to the MCAT a month and a half later, aced it, and kept moving. So I just share that to say that sometimes those step backs aren't really a fallback. It's just a different way of getting to where you're trying to get.
Thank you so much for your candor, because that's something people really need to hear, especially on that kind of medical school track. Dr. Robertson?
So pharmacy is a little bit different. And so there's a couple of different pathways you can take, but I can definitely say if you're interested in it, but not fully, baked for it, take the opportunity to do volunteer work. There are a lot of pharmacies, which are your chains that you can come on as a technician. And a lot of students that do the pharmacy route, they come with a 4-year degree already. So they've already did, one of the sciences before coming there. But definitely, I think it's important that you connect with someone that's in the field who's going to be candid with you about it, because it is a rigorous program. You also have the opportunity to do it straight out of high school. You do your 2 pre-professional years, and then you go directly into the professional program. So definitely, don't hesitate to ask those questions, because there are a lot of, and when I went to pharmacy school, they told us the first year, look to your left and look to your right. One of those persons will not be here because they're here for the wrong reason. If you're here because you think you're going to just make a lot of money, you're going to be gone by the 3rd year, if not sooner. So definitely, talk to those individuals that you have in your community and get that mentor. And I also am definitely open to mentoring those. I'm always open to sharing my experience. And so I also can be found on LinkedIn, but I will also put my email in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson Jones. I know you're particularly interested in mentoring FAM alum and those that are attending FAMs.
Yeah, I'm open to whomever, as long as I could pay it forward. That's what I like to do.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jackson Guilford.
Thank you for that. Similar to what Dr. Singleton and Dr. Robertson Jones has already mentioned, I would say definitely do your research. You can do that through using your friends, as Dr. Singleton said, who are ahead of you, mentors, as we've already mentioned. But I'm going to put a plug in here about a little story of when I was finishing undergrad at an HBCU. I was told that my next degree should be at a PWI, that I've had the HBCU experience, that it is time for me to go to a PWI. So I did apply to PWIs, but FAMU had just graduated 5 African-American PhDs, and the most in the country ever during that time. So I said, you know what, it's good what they're saying, and I was listening to their advice, but I also applied to FAMU, their College of Pharmacy, and their master's and PhD program, because they had just graduated 5 PhDs. So I will say to you, that didn't make a difference. I still work for a Fortune 100 company. And so I said all that to say, do what's best for you. You can listen to others and, definitely take into consideration what they're saying, but do what's best for you.
Thank you so much. I'm a double alum as well from Spelman and Clark Atlanta for my master's, and I agree with that sentiment for sure. Dr. Hinton?
Yes, so the question was, what did we do in our application process?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I had mentors that impressed upon me early that you are building your portfolio for your next step, your first day, your first year of college. And so you have to think about, there's this kind of stereotype that can sometimes persist, that you come into college and your freshman year is just, a complete wash, you get all the fun out and everything like that. But then you have to think about, you're also starting to take your prerequisites for graduate school and for medical school. So if you get C's or lower that first year, you are really doing a little damage to your transcript and to your profile. And you have to remember that you're not just competing with your classmates, you're competing with an international community who are trying to get into these same seats. So not just students at your school, neighboring schools, or in your state, but even students throughout the world for this 100 or 200 seats at a medical school or 10 seats at a graduate school. So I would say that as fun as college was, and we all probably had fun and we had our great stories, and I pledged undergrad, so I had a whole bunch of fun. You also have to manage that with being serious, because your profile starts your first day of class.
Okay, thank you so much. And Dr. Francis, if you can give an abbreviated question, because we have one last question in the Q&A I'd like us to get to.
So I would just say my journey was a bit of maybe happy accidents or lucky happenstances. What I did do was definitely research the area that I was interested in and which scholars were in that area. So that's how I decided who I wanted my major professor to be when I went into my PhD program, thinking about the balance between science equity and underrepresented population. So making sure that there is that, and then being really honest with yourself. Do you want to be a researcher, or do you want to be a practitioner, or a bit of both? Going to a research one institution, the expectation, and I think the rest of my cohort, they're all college professors, and I really had a strong passion to make sure that I was mostly focusing my energy on supporting my community and really doing the practitioner side of what I had studied. So that's my focus, or in my advice, making sure that you can figure out the mix of what is true to you and then taking those steps to find your own path.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Francis. Ashley, would you like to ask your question really quickly? You can ask it live. You're allowed to talk. If you can just come off your mute.
Hello, Soras. My question is, do you believe that a post-grad education is necessary within this current climate in STEM?
If anyone wants to jump in.
So I will say that there are lots of options right now, especially if we're thinking STEAM broadly. There's certificate programs, there's lots of add-on supports. So grad school is still a very relevant pathway, but do know that with the rise of tech careers, with the rise of additional specialties, there's lots of spaces that are opening up certificate routes, they're opening up on-the-job training. So it is valuable, but do know that there are multiple pathways to get to the different careers that are growing and popping up now.
Any additional, Dr. Lori?
I'll add that in addition to that, if you're thinking that grad school may not be for you, just making sure that you're using your summers in between your different college years wisely. So if you don't plan on going to grad school, find those opportunities to get those training and those experiences and internships during the summers.
Dr. Hinton, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Robertson-Jones.
It's driven by the career, because some careers require school after undergrad, so you have no choice. I guess depends on what career you're pursuing, and it doesn't hurt that as you're starting to think about your future career, look for those job ads and see what they require to help you make an informed decision.
Thank you.
I would definitely say that there are some additional opportunities or routes that you can take that does not require you to go and get a second degree, specifically in pharmacy, because you already come out with a doctor of pharmacy degree. But I will say that the market is somewhat saturated right now, depending on which area of the country you're in. So any type of certificate program that you can do in between, as some of my counterparts stated, in the summertime, if you're able to get those internships and foster relationships with those companies, they consider that on the job training, especially if it's something that you consistently do for more than one summer. So there's definitely a different route. You don't necessarily have to go, but it also dictates which area of STEM you want to go into.
And I will just finally add that the pharmaceutical industry has a lot of opportunities for you. For example, Dr. Robertson-Jones could be in pharmaceutical industry if she chose to. We have MDs that are medical directors. So we have PhDs, of course, that are research scientists. So there are a plethora of opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry. All of them don't necessarily require secondary degrees. And so if you enjoy research, I will add what I believe it was Dr. Hinton said, With your summers though, make sure you're you're doing internships and doing some research to prepare you ahead, but you don't have to necessarily have a secondary degree to start in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's my pitch for the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you all so much. I definitely appreciate it. I know we went over a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that one of the undergrad sorors got an opportunity to ask a question. I am so indebted to you ladies. Thank you so much for Dr. Simmons sponsoring this lovely event. And I am very happy to call these ladies my friends outside of the fact that they are amazing. And it's always nice to kind of see what your friends do in their professional life. So thank you so much, ladies. Everyone enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.